Good evening, everyone. Welcome to day 4 of the Learn Linux with PS program by the Area of Hackers. Today, we'll continue with our outline, and what we're talking about majorly today is user management and groups management. So, we have looked at the Linux file system, we have looked at terminal, we have looked at navigating the file system, we have looked at some command tips and tricks, we have looked at file permissions and management. So, today, we'll be looking at users and groups management. So as usual, I'll be working majorly in our terminal. So let's get to that quickly. So to get started, we are going to be looking at a few things. The things we'll be looking at is how to create a new user, how to modify a user's detail, how to create a group, how to add user to a group, then how to delete a user or delete a group. We'll be looking at two ways. We'll be looking at two commands to create a file and when to use one over the other. So let's just get started. Right now, we know we are logged in as rootfish. Then to confirm that, we can use who am I, and that shows us we are logged in as the user rootfish. Now, to create a user, you must have enough permissions to create a user. So we'll quickly talk about the sudo command. So we can use the man sudo command, and it says we can execute a command as another user. So using sudo, we can execute a command as another user. For example, we can execute a command as root. So run to create a new user, we must have root permissions. Presently, this user has root permission, and you can confirm that by using ID. And you can see that this user belongs to the sudo group. You can see that clearly, this sudo group. So since this user belongs to the sudo group, we can run sudo commands. And to check all the commands you can run, you can use the command sudo -l. Enter my password quickly. And see that user rootfish may run the following commands on the system rootfish. That means you can run any command as any user. So we know we have sudo command. So let's proceed to create new users. To create a new user, we can use one of two commands. We can either use the add user command and the user add command. We'll look at how to create users with the two, then when to use one over the other. When we use the add user command, it takes the command which is add user, then the username we want to give it. So let's create a new user with the username DOH user. So we use add user, then DOH user. Doing this, it says only roots may add a user or group. So we'll use the sudo command with it. Since we know sudo can let us run a command as the root user. So we'll use this command and it asks us to enter the password. So I'll just give it a password of password, confirm it, and this command requires you to enter some details. So you can leave them blank by typing, just pressing enter, confirm that it's correct, and now we can verify by going to home, and we can see that we have a new user called DOH user. That's how to create a new user with the add user command. So we'll look at the other parts, how to create a user with the user add command. So the one we looked at now is the add user command. We then looked at how to add user with the user add command. So similar to that command, we also need to have root privileges. So we use sudo user add. So let's create a new DOH user 2. And now if you notice the difference, the other one we used before asked us to enter the password immediately. It asks us to enter some details like the user's full name, address, and stuff. But this other command, it just takes the username and it creates a user. So if we try to go to home, we don't have it here. So we can check where users are stored, which is in the xt-passwd file. And we can see that we have a new user created with the username DOH user 2. Then this output is not pretty. I was trying to use a command yesterday, giving me an error. I think I figured it out. I think the command is empty password. Then we can pass this to column if I'm correct. Yeah. Okay. I think the output is much prettier now. So I'll run the command again. The command is I just use cat, then the empty password file, and pass that to column, then dash t to make it a table, and it's going to split on column. That's just a quick one. So now we can verify that the user DOH user2 has been added. So let's talk about the difference between the user add and add user. So let's say you want to create a single user. That's you can just use the add user command because it's just a single user and you can just enter the user's password immediately and enter their details and that's all. But if you need to enter like a list of users, it's more advisable to use the user add command because you may have new users and they want to set their password by themselves. So you don't have to set their password for them using the user add command. Just give it the username and it creates the user, then they can update their password later. But for the add user command, you have to enter the password immediately. So that's just one difference between add user and user add. The add user requires you to enter the password when you create the account, but with the user add, you can update the password later. Then we'll look at how to add groups too. So similar to how to add users, we have the add group command and the group add command. So we can also use add group, then the group name. Let's call this DOH group. Here we have to have sudo access. So and now we have the group DOH. Then to confirm that, you can also use, like I mentioned, the users are stored in exe passwd file, then groups are stored in exe, then group, I think, yeah, group file. You can also try to make it pretty by passing it to column, and we are going to split at, why do I keep calling it groups? Sorry, yes. Now we can see that the group DOH group has been created. Then the other command, which is group add instead of add group. So we can also use group add, I think. Then let's call it DOH group 2. I keep forgetting sudo. Now we can verify it has been added. Now we can see that we have the group DOH group 2. So there's no much difference between add group and group add. They do the same thing. They just create the group. Okay, what I said to create a new user on the system, we can either use the command add user or use the command user add. And I try to explain the difference between the two. So when you use the command user add and you give it the username, it requires you to enter the user password immediately. So you have to enter the password when you create the accounts and do some other things like enter the full name, room number, work phone, and the likes. Then it creates the user. But the other command, which is user add, using user add, then you can create a new user account without entering the details immediately. So the difference between both of them is just, if you check, when we use the add user command, it prompts us to enter the password immediately. So if in a case where you want to create an account for just one user, that's convenience because the user can be with you and you can ask the person to type in their password or whatever immediately for one user is convenient. But when you get to Linux administration and you have to add like 10 to 100 users at once, you won't want to be entering their user details, their password one after the other. So in that case, instead of using the add user command to add a new user, you can use the user add command, because that takes just the username you want to create and it creates it immediately. Then the user can go ahead to update their password later. Then I said similar to adding users, you can also add groups using the group add command or the add group command. And both of them takes just the group name you want to create and it's going to create the group. So moving on, next thing we look at is we have known how to create a new user, how to create groups. So we also look at how to add a user to a group. So let's say presently we have the group DOH group. So we can verify that. Let me just go quick. So we have the DOH group and we have a user with new underscore username as their username. So we can add this user to that group. And to do that, there's a command we can use. We can use the command user mod, which stands for user modification. So we can quickly look at the manual for it. And it says user mod and it modifies a user account. So what we want to do is modify the user account, and it has some options like -a, which is to append. We'll be using that. Then B and a whole lot of options which you can go through. Then we'll also be looking at the hyphen capital G, which stands for group. So to do that, we are going to add the user to the group. We just use sudo because we must have administrative permission to do it. User mod. Then the user we want to add. Before we add the username we want to add to the group, we have to add a couple of things. Like we saw in the manual, we use the -a to append, then the -g to show that we're adding the user to a group. Then the group we want to add the user to. So we want to add the user to group, DOH group. Before we do that, okay, let's presently confirm the groups this user belongs to. Now, if I am on groups, you can see that this user belongs to Rootfish and stuff, but the user does not belong to DOH group presently. So what we'll do is to add this user Rootfish to the DOH group. So we can go on by doing user mod, sudo user mod, then A to append, G to specify that we're adding to a group, then give it the group name we want to add the user to, then the username. So just as the user Rootfish. Running this, we get no error. Then running groups again, and this user should be added to this group. So I'll do this. So to add to a group, the command is use sudo user mod G, then the group you want to add the user to. So let's try to log in as another user. I think we can do sudo switch user to, let's say, the new user we created. Yep. So presently we run ID. You can see that this user belongs to just this new username group. So we want to add this user to the sudo group so that the user will be able to run some administrative commands. So we can use sudo user mod, then A to append, G, the group we want to add the user to, which is sudo, then the username, which is the current user. Okay, I think I have to set password for this account. So to set password for the account, you just have to do passwd. Then it will ask you to create an account. So presently I have no password. So I will do this. I think I must have with someone that has permission. So let me do this. Then I'll just give the user a password of password. Then change user to that user. And now if we run this again, you can see that the user does not belong to this group. So we add the user by doing sudo user mod dash a then dash g. The group we want to add the user to, which is the sudo group, and we'll give it the username of the user we want to add to the group. And hopefully I hope this works. So we'll switch user back to this new username, and now we run id. You can see that this user now belongs to the sudo group. Then to confirm that, we can try to run some administrative commands, like try to read a file that should not be readable. So if I run this command cat, so instead of, we know the user details is stored in the etc passwd file, then the user hash, like the hash of the user's password, is stored in the etc/shadow file. Normally, if we check the permission on the file, we do lsl xt shadow. You can see that it belongs to the root user, belongs to the shadow group, and everyone else has no permission. So we should not be able to read, write, or execute this file. So to confirm, we can just do cat this, and we get a permission denied. So to confirm that this particular user we have added to sudo group can run sudo commands, we will use sudo, then try to cat that file again. It prompts us for the password, enter it. Did I type it wrong? Yeah. And now we can read the file. So now we can confirm that the user has been added to the sudo group, and we can run some commands as the root user using sudo. So that's how to add a user to a group. Okay, I'll try to go right again. I said we have looked at how to create a user. So we looked at how to create a user, we looked at how to create a group. What I want to look at now is how to add a user to a group. To add a user to a group, I said we can use the user mod command. And to check what the command is doing, you can read the manual using man user mod. And it says this command allows us to modify a user account. And it has some options. You can go through them. The two options we'll be looking at is the dash A, which appends, then the dash capital G, which we can specify a group to add the user to. So to add a user to a group, we need to have administrative privileges using sudo. So you can use sudo, then the command, which is user mod, the dash A to append, then G, then we will specify the group we want to add the user to. It can be any group, then you specify the username of who you want to add to the group. So let's try to add the user new underscore username 2 to DOH group 2. So we want to add a user to this group, and the user we want to add is new username 2. So to confirm the user has been added to the group, let me check if we can run a command like do this. Okay, now we run groups on this username. You can see that the user belongs to this group, and that's also be added to DOH group 2. To confirm that, we can switch user to that user, new user underscore 2, and we can run ID, and we'll see that this user is not being added to the group DOH group 2. So that's how to add a user to a group. What does the command cat or etc do? Cat slash etc. Now, what I did when we talked about files yesterday, I said to view a file, we can use the cat command. So the cat command is just, it's a viewer. You can use it to open a file. So let me try to, we created some directories earlier. So we know we have this file, this.txt. Let's say we want to open this file. We can use the command cat, then give it the file name, and we can view the contents of the file. Then what I ran earlier, cat xt passwd, there's a file named xt-passwd. That's the file that contains users details. So let's check that quickly. We know we have created some users. We have created the user new underscore username, created the user new underscore username too. So we can cut that file and we'll see what is being stored. So if we check closely, we have the users we created. We have the DOH user, that's the username. We have the X here, which is a placeholder for the user's password. So when Linux was being used at first, it used to store the user's password hash in this file. I think that's why the name is passwd, like password. But later on, it was moved to the shadow file. So what this represents is just the first column is the username. The next column is a placeholder for the user's password hash. Then the next column is the user ID. The one after that is the group ID. Then if you have entered, when we use the add user command, it asks us to enter some things like the user's full name, phone number, and stuff. So if you have added them, you get the details right after the group ID. Then we have the user's default home directory, and you have the shell the user is using. So the command cat xt or passwd is just to open this file. So the etc passwd is a file on its own. You can verify that. You can say that it's just a regular file that belongs to the root user and the root group. Moving on, yesterday we looked at file permissions. So today we'll quickly look at this again. So we know when I was explaining yesterday, we focused on file permissions itself. So today we'll talk a little bit about file ownership. So we said this file belongs to rootfish. This first name here, it represents the owner of the file, and the next one represents the group of the file. So we know the owner of this file is rootfish, then the group the file belongs to is rootfish. So what we want to do is we want to look at how to change file ownership. So we want to make a file accessible to other people. So to make a scenario, let's just look at, let's say you have, in your company, you have a project everyone is working on. So you have the development guys, let's say you have a development team and they are working on a particular project and all of them need to access this particular file. So let's say like 5 or 6 of them need to access this file. Then one person created the file already. You don't need to say you want to keep each user, you have to like create the file, or the person that created the file will have to send it to each of them. What you can do is to create a group, then add all the people in the development team to that group, and they will be able to access this file. So let's do that quickly. Let's create a new group. Let's say we have a new development team in our company, in our virtual company. So we'll start by creating a group. So let's do group add and call the group development, if I could type. So now we have a group development. We can verify that in the group file. Now we know we have a development group. So let's say we have like the users we have created. Let's say DOH user, DOH user 2, new user, new underscore username, and new underscore username 2. They belong to the development team. So what we can do is to add all of them to that group. So I'll just do it the lazy way and add them manually. I know it's stressful, but so let's add the first user, DOH user, to that group. Then we add DOH user 2. Then we add new underscore username, and we add new underscore username 2. So now if we run groups on, let's say DOH user, we know the user belongs to this development group already. So let's see what effects this can have on file and file ownership. Now we know this particular file belongs to rootfish. and belongs to group rootfish. So we want to change the ownership of this file such that it's going to belong to rootfish, then it's going to belong to people from development group. If we log in as, let's try to switch user using, then the command I used earlier, the su means switch user. You can check man su, then it runs a command with substitute user and group ID. So it just allows you to change user. So let's change into the user or doh user. Now if we run ls here and let's remove the read permission from the group. Let's, let's exit out quickly, then change mode such that this particular file has, let's just say, read to the group. Okay, yeah, this should work fine. Only the group. Let's remove permission from everyone. So it is 740. Let's do this. Okay, now we know everyone can read the file. So just people that belong to rootfish, and we'll change the file ownership real quick. So let's change the group owner of the file to development. So the command we can use to change file ownership is sudo, similar to chmod. The command is chown. So you can use man chown, and it says you can use the command to change file owner and group. So to do that, we'll use chown. Then we want to make the owner of the file still rootfish, but the group should be development. The group should be development, and we'll give it the file name. Now if we run ls again, you can see that the file now belongs to rootfish and is accessible by people from development group. So we can change user to, let's say, doh user, and now if we try to read the file, because we belong to development group, we should be able to read this file. So if we do cat doh.txt, we can see that we can read the file because the group will belong to have access to read the file. But what if we try to exit the file? Now we can see we get the error file is unwritable because the group permission does not allow us to have write access on this file. So we know this user belongs to this development group. That's why the user can access this file. So let's quickly create another user. The user won't belong to this group. Then we'll try to access this file from the user's account. So let's create a new user. So let's just use user add and say, that's not a good username, but it works. So then we'll change user to this user. And now we can still see this file. This user is not a part of the development group. Now we'll try to just read the file and see what we get. .txt. Now you can see that we get a permission denied, and that's because the user is not a part of the development group. The user is not a You can see that this user is not a part of the development group, so this user does not have access to it. So what we look at is how to just change file permission. So to change the file permission, we can use the chown command, the user and the group we want the file to belong to. So as I said, the scenario was you have a new development team and you have like 5 to 6 users in that team, and you want them to be able to access a file. So instead of just copying the file to each of them individually, you can create a group, add all the users to that group, and make the file ownership belong to that group so each of them can access it. So what I said was we have a scenario whereby you have let's say you have a new team in an organization. Let's take the development team, for example. You have like 5 to 6 of them. They have accounts on the server, and all of them need to access a particular file, let's say the main source file of their project. As I was saying, let's say the file they need to access is this dh.txt file. So instead of copying the files over to each of them individually, so what we can do, instead of copying the files individually to each user, what we can do is to create a particular group, then add all the users in the development team to that development group. So there's a group development, and all the team members, we add them to a particular group and change the file ownership of the file that needs to be accessed to that particular group. So this file now belongs to rootfish user and belongs to development group. So anyone in development group have access to this file. So we said what to do is just create a group, then add all the users to that particular group and change the file ownership to belong to that group. So everyone in that group should be able to access the file. So the last thing we'll be looking at today, we have looked at how to add a user, how to create a group, how to add a user to a group, how to change file ownership. So the last thing we'll be looking at is how to delete a group or how to delete a user's account. So let's say you have a user in the company, you got tired of him and you sacked him. So instead of maintaining his access, you can actually delete users' accounts on the system. So similar to the commands we use to create the user, we use the add user and we also use the user add commands. So to delete a user, you can use the delete user, which is del user, or use the user del user delete. We can use the manual to read more about what they do. So del or del user or del group remove a user or group from the system. Also, the user del delete a user account and related files. So delete a user's account, you can just use, we must have the permission to do it. So we use sudo, let's say user delete del, then we give it the username we want to delete. So let's delete the doh user. Let's try to, I'm logging as that user, so I will exit out. And now I will try to do that again. So user delete, then the username we want to delete. And now if we go back to home, let's just try to switch user to that user again, and we should get an error. Now it says the user does not exist on the system because we have deleted it. So to delete a user, you can either use the del user, delete user, or just use the user del. Both of them perform the same function. It will remove the user from the system. That's everything we should be looking at. Then I need a way to change username with the short command used on Monday. Yeah, we'll just look at that quickly. To change a username, so now we know we have this user user2. We know we have this user. So we'll change this user's name. So let's say we want to change username. The command is usermod. Like we said earlier, usermod allows us to modify a user's account. And the username is part of the user details, so we can modify it. To change a username, we need to use an option from this list. I think the option is -L. Yes, this option takes the login name, so we can pass the old login name to it and give it a new one. So if we read what this flag does, it says the name of the user will be changed from login, which is the old username in this case, to new login. Then nothing else is changed. That's just it. So nothing else is changed, just the username. To do that, we'll just use the command sudo, then usermod -L, and we'll pass the old username. So the old username is gohuser2, and we want to change the username to, let's say, user edited. Oh, sorry, did I get that wrong? Okay, I think it's the new one. Yes. Then we'll give it the old one. Yes, that works. Sorry for that. So let's try to go over that again. So to change a username, we need to use the command sudo usermod then dash L. We pass it the new username we want to give it. So let's say we want to change the username to user edit, and the username we want to change is, let's change this one. So earlier we were able to do sudo su into this account. Now we get an error saying this account does not exist because we have changed the name to user edit. So now we can try to log in as the user edits, and we're able to log in as that, which you can verify from here on just do one my. So the user's username has been changed from new underscore username to user underscore edit. So the question, please explain this again. The first, I missed the question. Okay, let me, I don't know if you guys can see the question. Let me just try to paste it again so everyone can see it. Okay, that's the question. Please explain this again. So when I explained this yesterday, I said in Linux, everything is a file. So directories, normal files, symbolic links, devices, they are all files in Linux. And I said you can identify each file type by what is in front of them when you do a listing. So we know this first day I have is a directory, and that's a blue highlighting because it's a directory. But when we're looking at the file permission here, you can see that before the file permissions, we have a D. And what the D represents is that it is a directory. Then when it comes to a regular file, instead of having a D or F or whatever, we have just a dash. So the first dash in front of the permission identifies that this file is just a regular file. So what this first hyphen or dash represents is that this particular file is a regular file. Then if you check the next one, instead of having a dash, we have D because this file is a directory. That's all we'll be looking at today. So I'll just try to do a quick recap and we'll call it a day. So today we talked about users management and ghost management. We looked at how to create a new user with the user add and the add user command. And I said the difference between the two is that the add user command requires you to enter the user's password when you create the account. So when you use the add user command, you have to enter the password and some optional details like full name and stuff. But the user add command, you can just create the account without entering the password or other details, and it can be updated later. So if you need to create just a single account, you can use the add user command, just create the account and you can enter the details. But let's say you need to enter a bunch of username, you need to create a bunch of user accounts. The faster way is to use the user add command, then just put the usernames in a file, and you can create all the accounts without needing to enter the password immediately. The passwords can be updated later. Then we looked at how to create a group using the group add and the add group command, and both of them just takes the group name and it creates the group. Then we looked at how to add a user to a group using the user mod command. So we say we can add a user to a group using sudo user mod -a-g to append the user to a group. So we give it the group name we want to add the user to and the username. And to know more about this command, you can use the man user mod command to see what the options do. Then we also talked about a quick one we talked about is how to change username. So to do that, you also use the sudo mod command, then give it the -l, and you give it the new username you want, and pass the old username to it. So the syntax is sudo user mod, which is the command, -l. When we check the manual, we can see that it represents the login. So we give it the new login name we want to use, and we pass the old username. So the command will remove the old username and give it this new username. Then everything else is unchanged. So just the username will be changed with this command. And finally, we looked at how to delete a user and how to delete a group. So we say, similar to how to create user, we can use user del, or we can use del user. Both of them will delete a user or a group. The question was, it said, when trying to change the username, I'm getting username is currently used by process 667. What does it mean? What it means is that a process is using, let's say a particular process is running under the user account currently, and you don't have permission to change it because the process is in play. So what you need to do is kill that particular process that is running. And to kill a process, there are a few ways you can do that. You can set a quick way is to use the kill command. So you can use kill, then 9. To look at what that does, you can just use man kill. Then you can check the options. It says kill 9 kills all process you can kill. So it kills the process. So you can just use kill 9, then the process ID in your case, which is 667, and it's going to kill the process. Or if you know the process name, you can use pkill and just pass the process name to it. So once you run the command, you must have privilege to do it. So use sudo kill 9, and the process ID in your case is 667. Once the command is no longer in play, you can change the username without problems. So thank you guys for joining today's session. And tomorrow is the last day of the training. So tomorrow I will be dropping the challenge for tomorrow. Then during tomorrow's session, we'll look at the last thing in our outline, which is service management and tool installation. We'll look at a few things about process management, and we'll talk about some Linux operators. Also in tomorrow's session, we'll be having our final poll, which will be the challenge 5. So that will be the conclusion for the session in the training in general. So once again, thank you all for joining. We appreciate you for giving us time to be in the session so far. So have a nice day from wherever you are joining us. So thanks and bye.